The African Ambassadors Economic Forum 2026.
The chair, very distinguished ladies and gentlemen, guests. First, I want to commend this initiative that is bringing together the African community, diaspora, ambassadors, and all to reflect on the possibilities of our continent, which remains really very, very bright, but is hindered at this time, hampered, one could even say, by a number of challenges that need to be overcome. And only good leadership can help overcome those. It's a very broad and important subject matter, but we're going to focus in these remarks on institutions, values, and economic performance. But let me begin in introducing this subject matter by going back to 1958. In 1958, Kwame Nkrumah, leader of Ghana, that had just become independent in 1957, brought together the leaders of Africa in Accra to look at the future of the continent. And during that summit in Accra, some goals were set, some visions were projected of the place of Africa in the world, and how collaborative behavior amongst leaders would help get Africa to play the role that, if you will, creation has ascribed to it. Since then, of course, Africa has had many challenges. Many of the founding fathers of that season of what Harold Macmillan, the British Prime Minister, called the winds of change, many of them have been swept away by changes like military coups and all of that. And we have come to a time when Africa needs to be rethinking how it travels going forward. At the time that President Nkrumah, summoned Africa to engage with its future and talked about seeking first the political kingdom and everything else to be added onto it, he didn't ignore economic development at all. Indeed, just about that time, Arthur Lewis, Professor Arthur Lewis, Sir Arthur Lewis, who would become the first black man to win the Nobel Prize in economics, was actually developing a report, a program for industrialization of the Gold Coast, as it then was. And in the main, Arthur Lewis's work focused on the deployment of the ideas of import substitution industrialization to drive up manufacturing in Ghana. And this approach was actually emulated by some of the neighbors like Nigeria, such that as Nigeria became self-governing but not independent in that period, 56, 57, and the Prime Minister, Tafawa Balewa, worked very closely with Dr. Pazo Kibo, his economic advisor, to lay out such a program. In fact, Dr. Kibo speaks to this season in his collection of thoughts, the public philosophy of development, and his work on Nigerian public accounts, and all of those reflect how that whole process evolved, which remarkably led Nigeria in a very short period between 1957 and 1960 and independence to be one of the fastest industrializing countries in the world. Manufacturing had gone from next to zero to nearly 20% of GDP by independence in 1960. Unfortunately, we've suffered reversals in all of these things in Nigeria. as well as in Ghana and such places around the continent. And so the big leadership challenge is how to turn around these economic troubles. Well, African leaders have shown some vision in their approach to this. They've shown that commitment to a new way in the Vision 2063 initiative. They've shown it in the creation of the Afri-Exim Bank to facilitate intra-African trade. Right now, Africa trades very poorly with itself and contributes less than 3% of world trade. And whereas if we could develop institutional arrangements that would lead to aggregation across borders, Africa's share in world trade can jump very, very significantly. So, what is to be done? At the heart of this is how our institutions are strengthened. At the heart of this is how we facilitate, people being more familiar with one another across borders so they can do business together, which is why after African Free Trade Area is such an important institutional arrangement. But to get to the heart of how this really should work for the continent, one has to ask the fundamental question: what got in the place of growth and development in Africa? In those very early days of thinking independence, the idea was to create